The factor that you're asking about that we're going to amplify here is the resistant factor. In other words, when you want something, but you have a habit of not expecting it to come, then it doesn't come. When you want something that is a new thought that you haven't practiced opposite thought about, then since there's no resistance, the universe yields it to you immediately. The 3-step process is when you ask, it's always queued up for you. In other words, step 1 happens because contrast causes you to ask. Source lines it up immediately, but then you've got to get yourself in the vibrational vicinity. So in the example that you just gave, when it comes quickly, you were already in the vibrational vicinity, meaning you didn't have any resistant thought that was in the way of it. Often those things that you've wanted for a long time, you have just such a habit of expectation around them that you have resistance without even knowing it. We touched on it briefly here today when we said every subject is 2 subjects. And so the subject of money is money or lack of it. The subject of health is health or lack of it. And so it's like picking up a stick that has 2 ends on it. And sometimes you think you're talking about money, but really you're more active on the don't have it end than you are the wanted end. Another way of saying this is a desire that has no resistance just feels fresh and life-giving, while a desire that has resistance feels more like yearning. And a lot of people are yearning for things. They want it so much, they're aching for it. But when that is the case, they've got a big wad of resistance that's just slowing it down. And until they stop doing that thing they're doing, it can't come. So how to get around that? How do you shift the way you feel? In other words, we used to play a lot as we had written the book when it had recently been written, ask and it is given. And we aren't kidding about it. When you ask, it is given. And we teased that people would say that can't be true. Where's my stuff? Because I know I've been asking, where is it? And we say it's waiting for you in this vibrational reality, waiting for you to stop dominantly believing that it isn't there. It's the same thing that you can't find something that you believe is lost. You have to get distracted from it where you're no longer keeping active that vibration that you can't find it. And when you get distracted, it turns right up in your experience. Because when you ask, it is given, but the path of least resistance has to do with the resistance, you see. So how does someone change a belief about something to allow what they want in? Well, the way you do it is by reaching for thoughts that feel increasingly better to you. You feel your way into alignment. All right, so now if you were just to look at just that sentence, you talked about what you want, and the opposite of it, you went back and forth several times. Because you said, I want more free time, and you said more creative work, but less time at work. In other words, so even though it sounded like you were talking about what you want, you were talking about what you don't want about as much as you were talking about what you want.
Whoa.
Well, everyone does it. It's sort of like, I want this, but I want this, but I want this, but, so you don't gain any momentum. So what you want to do is begin telling a story in a more productive way. I look forward to doing more of my creative work. So it really is about just telling the story more the way you want it to be, which means telling the story the way that gives you greater relief. We want you to get hooked on the feeling of alignment, because the reason you like to write is because you can't write unless you're in alignment. And when you're in alignment, you're really being who you are. And so it's really bogus. We love you very much, but it's really bogus for you to blame not writing on having to do other things. Yes. In other words, Esther spends a very small percentage of her life in the mode where books flow through her, and yet book after book after book after book after book after book flows. Yeah. Because it doesn't take that much time to write a book. It really doesn't take that much time to write a book. But it takes a lot of time to get yourself into the vortex where you can receive a book. It's not writing the book that takes time. It's preparing yourself vibrationally that takes the time, you see. So, and complaining is out of the vortex whether the complaint is valid or not. You see. It seems rational to most people to just tell it like it is. And we say, if you continue to tell it like it is, if you continue to speak of the shortage of time, then the shortage of time will continue to be dominant in your experience. So you have to stop telling that story and tell a different story. And some people say, well, it makes me uncomfortable when I just make up a whole big old fib over something. And we say, well, then tell the fib in the way that doesn't upset you. In other words, talk about your joy of writing rather than your lack of time. Talk about the power of alignment rather than your lack of time. Talk about the exhilaration you get from writing rather than your lack of time. Talk about how time does begin to show itself to you more and more. Talk about how everybody has the same 24 hours. Talk about how you can spend 24 hours in alignment or 24 hours out of alignment, and the in alignment time is ever so much more productive. Talk about the laws of the universe. In other words, we've noticed that usually the more specific you are, the more resistant you are. And the more general you are, the less resistant you are. So just keep stepping back into more and more general statements until you find yourself in alignment with who you are. For example, I can feel the power of my alignment when I accomplish it. And I've discovered that I can accomplish alignment anytime I decide to. And I'm learning that no matter what I'm doing, I have the ability to reach for alignment factors within it. Okay. So it doesn't really matter what I'm doing or where I'm doing it or who I'm doing it with. I can focus myself into alignment. Everything that I want is because I think I will feel better in the having of it. And by reaching for alignment, I feel better first. That's what we were saying, get in the vortex and then think, get in the vortex and then write. In other words, just make general statements. This is something that all of you are in a position to do more clearly now than ever before, because now, even though you might not be in a position where you can stop doing what you're doing in order to do something else you want to do, a lot of you feel that that's the position you're in. You now have understanding of the laws of the universe. In other words, you now can speak and feel and know about the vortex. You can say, I'm an extension of source energy, and through the power of my focus, I can be outside the vortex and therefore less productive, or inside the vortex and therefore more productive. I can be outside the vortex and feel less good, or I can be inside the vortex and feel supremely good. I have the power to focus myself into the vortex no matter what, all day, every day. I am an extension of source energy. The larger part of me is already in the vortex. The larger part of me is calling me there. When I feel negative emotion, it just means I'm not going. When I feel positive emotion, it means I'm moving in the direction of it. I have this guidance that is always there for me. I believe in the laws of the universe. I believe that law of attraction is consistent. I believe that my life has caused me to ask for things that are all queued up for me vibrationally. I believe that my guidance lets me know, my emotional guidance, whether I'm in the vicinity of it or not. I believe that when I'm fearful, I'm further from the vortex. I believe that when I'm angry, I'm not as far, but still far from the vortex. When I'm overwhelmed, I'm still pretty far from the vortex. When I'm hopeful, I'm right on the verge of the vortex. If I can be hopeful, the vortex will take me in. Take me in. Now I'm believing. Now I'm in the vortex. I understand the laws of the universe. I understand the eternal nature of my being. I understand that I am spiritual no matter what. I understand that source energy is always there, wrapped around all that I have become. I understand that my emotions are my indicator of how well aligned or not aligned I am. I understand that my work is to close this gap. I understand that there are things that I can focus upon that will take me right in the vortex, and things I can focus upon that will take me right out of the vortex. I understand that nothing is more important than that I be in the vortex. There are so many things that I've been worried about that I can't do anything about. All of these uncontrollable components, I've decided to stop trying to control the uncontrollable and control something that I can control, which is my proximity to the vortex. I can tell a better feeling story. I can't change that and that and that and that, but I can tell a better feeling story. And when I tell a better feeling story, now I'm in the vortex where everything that I want is. And when I'm in the vortex, now the world looks different, the world feels different, I rendezvous with different things. Even time is different from inside the vortex, you say. Every thought that has ever been thought still exists. But the only thing that is pertinent to you in any point in time is the thought that's active within you and its relationship to the thought that who you really are is thinking. So, law of attraction is gathering all cooperative components. So, those thoughts, it's a better analogy than you were able to hear. When a radio station is broadcasting a signal, it's irrelevant to you unless you set your tuner for the same frequency. So, all these thoughts that have been thought out here in your physical leading edge. And just for sake of clarification, let's call them negative thoughts for a moment. All those negative thoughts that have been thought are out there swirling around, and law of attraction is causing a gathering or a coalescing of them into streams or rivers. But unless you get on the frequency of them, they are irrelevant to you. They cannot touch you. You won't have exposure or experience with them, you see. We said in the early part of the year, and Esther overheard it because she was editing the recordings from that series. We said the sequence of processes that we would apply if we were standing in your physical shoes and we're asking the question that you're asking is, we would go to our bed when we're ready to finish the day, and we would bring our world in, and we would focus upon something as simple as the feel of the fabric of the bedding that surrounded us and the feel of the pillow. We would focus upon the texture of the air. We would focus upon the things that are up close to us and only the things that are up close to us. And in that attitude of drawing inward with an intention to feel it and appreciate it, we would drift off to sleep. So Esther began doing that and began feeling the deliciousness of true aligned sleep. Then the next process, we said, when you awaken in the morning, if you go to sleep in the vortex, you wake up in the vortex. So if you've done your work when you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning, wake up and acknowledge how good you feel. Focus again back on the things that are surrounding you that you are feeling comfort about, and then let your appreciation reach outward a bit. And as your appreciation expands outward a bit, you run the risk of getting out of the vortex, because the further out you reach, the more possibility of running into things that bother you. But still, try to hold yourself in that state of appreciation for as long as you can. And in the moment that you have your first uncomfortable thought, get your feet on the floor and get out of bed. It was not your non-physical intention to come into the physical experience and live most of it outside the vortex. Your intention was to live most of it inside the vortex with an occasional excursion outside just to put more good stuff in, you see. So we want you in the vortex, we want you in the vortex, we want you in the vortex, we want you in the vortex. And we see no excuse for any of you, now that you know what you know, not to be in the vortex. In other words, there's no reason to not be in the vortex. We just want you to know that once you get in there and you stabilize in there and you find the feeling place of it and you remind yourself of who you really are and what it feels like to be in the vortex, we'll never have to have this conversation again. Esther heard the words, she heard the words, she heard the words, she heard the words, she heard the words. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. She's been listening to us for years. Have you seen how many ways we've stood on her head in order to explain to you? It's downstream, it's upstream, it's alignment, it's desire, it's belief, it's a vortex. In other words, there's no end to what we're willing to say to you in order to help you. But it isn't until you actually do the things and you actually feel the difference of being one day, almost all day in the vortex. We don't have to have any conversations with Esther ever again about the alignment of her being. She felt it, she's lived it, she wants it, she knows it's normal. Anything less than that is not acceptable. And now we want to say to you, that's what's been going on with you for a long time. The reason that it feels so dramatic to you is because you have at very deep levels of your being conscious awareness of what it feels like to be in the vortex, and being out of the vortex is just no longer acceptable. And that's the way we want it to be for all of you. You don't have to move away from anything or anyone to be in the vortex. You just have to understand that it is there. Do you? Do you believe the vortex is a reality that is there? Do you believe that it's accessible to you, by you? Do you understand that it's just a vibration away? Esther didn't get it either until recently, the momentum that could be built. She wants to get a toehold of something, just something, and then milk it and milk it and milk it and milk it and milk it until now she knows so unequivocally what it feels like to be in that vortex that nothing else is tolerable. She said to Jerry, I'm in the vortex and I'm never coming out. And then she said, don't make me come out. And out she went. But it doesn't matter, because when you're out, when you've been in, you know you can get right back in. In other words, we want to make this vibrational reality so real to you that you stop giving any conversation to not being in there. Sure, a lot of you aren't in there. So what? Get in. But Abraham, I'm not in for it. So what? Get in. But you don't understand. So what? Get in. Get in. Get in. Get in. Get in. No more excuses. Get in.